Beneath the twin moons of Aravel, night did not fall, it devoured. It poured like black water over the mountains, swallowing the forests, the rivers, the breath of every creature that dared survive under the empire of wolves. Somewhere inside that darkness, a girl scrubbed stone. Her name was Mira Thornfield, though no one in the palace called her that. They called her Omega, servant debt-born. The girl who never raised her eyes. For 11 winters she had served in the Silver Crest Palace, the seat of the strongest pack east of the Obsidian Sea. She had learned that silence could be armor, that obedience could be camouflage, and that dreams were more dangerous than knives. The torches in the corridor hissed with blue fire as she wrung out her cloth and moved to the next slab. Each motion was a ritual: soak, scrub, rinse, until the scent of lye crawled into her lungs. Outside, thunder rolled like something ancient turning in its sleep. It had rained the night her parents died. Memory came to her in flashes. Her father's calloused hands, the glow of a cottage hearth, a woman's laughter that smelled of pine. Then the knock on the door. The soldiers. The fire. And the mark they carved into her shoulder, a crescent over crossed chains. Debt seal. She had been 10. She had learned then that mercy was an illusion. The world had other names for her lineage. Nightshade bloodline, the clan that once tried to overthrow the moon throne. Cursed wolves touched by the void. It was a legacy the palace believed extinct. Mira made sure it stayed that way. Every morning she dyed her hair black to hide the gold that glimmered when moonlight touched it, the color of Nightshade royalty. Every night she whispered to herself that survival was worth any lie, but fate is a patient beast. That night, the corridors trembled with preparation. The servants ran in flurries of panic. Tonight would be the mate selection ball for Crown Alpha Kael Rowan, heir of Silvercrest, the ruthless conqueror, who ruled in his father's stead since the old Alpha's mysterious death. Mira had never seen him closely. She had seen his shadow once, passing through the torchlight, tall, wrapped in command. The palace spoke of him in tones that were half prayer, half fear. Some said he was blessed by the moon goddess. Others whispered he was cursed, touched by the same darkness that had once belonged to the Nightshade clan. Either way, he was untouchable. Faster, hissed Mistress Garrett, the head maid, a woman carved entirely out of spite. If the floors don't gleam before dawn, I'll have you feeding the kennels. Mira kept her head down. The lash of the woman's voice still stung even when no whip followed. She had learned not to answer. Hours later, as dawn seeped through the stained glass, she finally slipped into the kitchens to steal a crust of bread. Steam rolled from iron pots, thick with the scent of meat she would never taste. The other maids whispered in excitement about the gowns, the music, the Alpha's rumored beauty. Mira listened and said nothing. When she returned to the upper halls, the palace had changed. The chandeliers blazed with white flame. Musicians tuned their strings, nobles glittered like jewels spilled across marble. The scent of roses and ambition filled the air. She tried to become part of the walls. A shadow carrying a tray dot, then it happened. A flash of silk. A collision. Cold wine cascaded down a noblewoman's gown. Glass shattered. Laughter froze. Mira froze too, the tray clattering from her hands. The woman before her was pale as frost, lips crimson, eyes like honed ice. The princess of the Moonlight Empire, daughter of the Emperor himself. Seraphine Valeris, do you have eyes, filth? Seraphine's voice was velvet wrapping broken glass. The slap came before the words ended. Pain bloomed hot across Mira's cheek. Every gaze in the hall turned. Shame was a second skin. She wore it well. She bowed, whispered an apology, and tried to gather the shards. And then silence thickened. A different voice entered the air, low, measured, ancient. Enough. The crowd parted like water around the prow of a ship. A woman robed in silver stepped forward, the High Oracle Lysandra, advisor of the Alpha, her eyes blind yet burning with inner light. She studied Mira as if she were reading a script only she could see. When she spoke, her tone carried judgment older than the palace itself. You carry Forbidden's blood, child. Mira's stomach twisted. The Nightshade mark lies hidden beneath your dye, Lysandra murmured. Your mother's lines still breathe through you. The hall erupted. Gasps, curses, the rustle of panic. Kael Rowan appeared then, drawn by the storm. His presence quieted the crowd, not by command but by gravity itself. His eyes, black with threads of silver, locked on Mira for a heartbeat. The world tilted. The air between them thickened until every sound seemed to dissolve. Something ancient stirred inside her, like a door unlocking in her bones. Heat flooded her veins, wild and electric. In the darkness of her mind, a whisper bloomed. Maid. Kael flinched. His nostrils flared. His own wolf rose in answer. No one spoke. Every eye waited. Every breath hung suspended. Then Kael's jaw hardened. His voice was thunder striking marble. Impossible. The oracle's lips curved in a knowing line. The moon chooses, not man. Kael's gaze burned with fury. The moon is mistaken. And in that moment, something inside Mira, something long buried, began to wake. She did not understand it yet. But the curse of her lineage had found its echo. Hooked to next section. As the music died and the whispers swelled, the moon itself trembled above the palace spires and in the catacombs below. Something that had slept for centuries began to stir. The ballroom's silence felt alive. Mira stood in the center, the stain of spilled wine dark on her apron, the oracle's words still echoing in the crystal vaults overhead. Nightshade blood. A curse given shape. The nobles shrank from her as if contagion rode on her breath. Kael Rowan's eyes were on her the way. Lightning looks at the tree, intense to strike. Every instinct in Mira screamed to run. But running inside the Silver Crest Palace was like fleeing in circles. The walls curved back on themselves until escape became another word for exhaustion. Take her below, Kael ordered. 2 guards obeyed, their hands iron around her arms. The descent into the lower corridors tasted of dust and old prayers. Stone swallowed the music above. The further they went, the older the palace smelled, mildew, candle fat, blood gone dry in forgotten grooves. At the final arch the guards stopped, unlocked a gate etched with sigils that hummed faintly in her bones, and shoved her inside. The cell was a circle carved into the mountain itself. A single torch guttered in its bracket, painting everything in fever orange. The chains on the wall were iron. They were something darker, metal forged to bind wolves. Mira sat. She had been here before in dreams she never understood. A room, a chain, a heartbeat counting down to something terrible. Above her, thunder rolled again. Hours blurred. She dozed and woke and dozed, her mind replaying the moment Kael's gaze had balked with hers. The ball mark that should have flared on his wrist had not appeared. Yet she'd felt it ignite beneath her skin. A circle of fire pulsing faintly between her ribs. Maid. The word refused to die. When the door opened again, she expected guards. Instead, the oracle entered, guided by a novice holding a lamp. Her sightless eyes found Mira as if they had been waiting centuries. The moon rarely errs, Lysandra said. But she tests. Mira's voice was cracked from silence. Why me? Because your blood remembers what others have forgotten. The Nightshade line guarded the moon's second heart. When your ancestors rebelled, they were not seeking crowns. They were trying to keep the heart from falling into shadow. I don't understand. You will. The oracle reached into her sleeve and drew a small vial of mercury bright liquid. Drink this, and you will see the truth written in your blood. Mira hesitated. Poison or prophecy, with the oracle, they were the same. But curiosity was a hunger sharper than fear. She drank. The world tilted. Cold fire flooded her veins, searing through every nerve until the cell dissolved. She stood in a field of black glass beneath a sky without stars. In the distance, wolves made of smoke tore each other apart around a pillar of white flame. At the base of the pillar knelt a woman who could have been her mirror, gold hair, eyes the color of dawn. Chains wrapped her wrists. When she lifted her face, Mira felt the recognition like a blowed-out mother. The vision cracked. The glass field shattered into shards that turned into screams. She fell through them, through time, through herself. When she came back, she was on the cell floor, trembling, blood on her lips. The heart, the oracle said softly, beats again. The curse is waking because something beneath this palace has been disturbed. And the Alpha is tied to it as surely as you are. Kael? The name came unbidden, bitter, and necessary. He carries the other half of your bond and of the curse. What killed his father still walks these halls. If he rejects you, it will consume him. If you reject him, it will consume you both. Lysandra turned toward the door. When darkness moves, the moon binds enemies together so that one cannot fall without the other. Pray you learn which of you is the hunter." Then she was gone. Mira sat in the dim light, her pulse hammering against the faint burn of the unseen mark over her heart. The bond was real. The oracle's words, a riddle she could not yet solve, dot above. The palace woke to another day of luxury, unaware that beneath its floors the first tremors of ruin had begun. Kael Rowan did not sleep. He stood on his balcony overlooking the silver forest, the moonlight sharp enough to cut. The scent of rain lingered, mixed with iron, the aftermath of storms and blood both. Below, the city murmured. He had been raised to command, not to doubt. Yet doubt had stalked him ever since the oracle's pronouncement, an omega, a nightshade. His mate, he should have rejected her the instant he felt the pull. Yet, when her eyes had lifted to his, he had seen not weakness but the same silent fury that burned in him since his father's death. The same loneliness. The same curse dot in the reflection of the window. His own bomb mark flickered once, a ghost of light beneath the skin, and vanished. That frightened him more than any war. He called for his beta. "Corin." The man entered, weary and loyal. "Have the archives searched?" Kael said. "Every record on the Nightshade line. Find me what my father hid. And the girl? Keep her contained. But no harm." The hesitation in his own voice annoyed him. "She may know something even the oracle fears to name." Corin bowed and left. The door's echo lingered like guilt. Outside, lightning stitched the horizon. Kael's wolf stirred beneath his skin, restless, whispering one word over and over in the dark corners of his mind. Mind out by the next dusk, the cell door opened again. Mira blinked against the light. Guards stepped aside and Kael himself entered, black cloak trailing dust. The sight of him in the cramped space made the air thin. He didn't speak. He just looked at her, eyes unreadable. For the first time, she saw the faint silver veins that pulsed at his throat, sign of a wolf whose control was slipping. He unlocked the chain himself. "Come," he said. No explanation. No apology. They walked through silent tunnels that spiraled upward into a part of the palace Mira had never seen, ancient. Forgotten walls carved with runes that glowed faintly as they passed. At the end waited a stone door sealed by a sigil identical to the scar on her shoulder. Her breath caught. "That mark was on my father's coffin," Kael finished. "You're going to tell me why." "I can't." "You will." Before she could answer, the sigil pulsed. The door shuddered and split open as if welcoming her. Cold wind rushed out carrying the scent of ashes and something older than wolves. Inside lay a circular chamber lit by a heart of pale fire, suspended above an altar. It pulsed like a heartbeat. On the walls, carvings of wolves bowed to a single woman with hair of gold. Mira stepped closer. The fire flared brighter, answering her. Kael's blade hissed free. "What are you?" "Something you were never meant to destroy." The floor convulsed. Shadows spilled from the cracks, forming shapes that looked almost human before twisting into beasts, limbs too long, eyes burning red. The chamber screamed. Kael moved first, steel flashing. Mira's body reacted before thought, claws erupting from her fingertips, not silver like a wolf's, but black like obsidian. When she slashed, the air itself tore. The nearest creature disintegrated into smoke. Kael stared. "Nightshade magic." "It's not magic," she panted. "It's memory." The heart above them throbbed faster, throwing shards of white light that seared the shadows away. Then, as suddenly as it began, the chamber stilled. Kael's sword dripped black blood that hissed where it fell. He looked at her, breath ragged. "Whatever that was, it woke when you touched the fire." "It was already waking," Mira said. "Because something in this palace is feeding it." Kael wiped his blade and sheathed it. "Then we find it, together." She almost laughed. "The Alpha and the cursed Omega?" "The bond chose us," he said quietly. "We can fight each other. Or we can fight what's coming." Outside the chamber, the torches guttered, as if the palace itself had been listening. That night the nightmares returned. Mira saw a crown of thorns forged from silver bones. She saw Kael kneeling before a throne made of roots and ash, a shadow hand resting on his shoulder. She heard her mother's voice whisper, "When the moon splits, only the cursed will keep it whole." She woke to the toll of the midnight bell and the scream of something dying far away. In the morning, a servant was found torn apart in the eastern wing, a servant who had once mocked Mira. On the wall above the body, written in blood, was a symbol she recognized from the cell floor, the Nightshade crest. The court called it murder. The oracle called it warning, and Mira, standing in the corridor as the guards whispered, understood the truth. The curse was no longer sleeping, it was hunting. Night did not end so much as thin. Gray seeped down the corridors of Silvercrest, turning gold leaf into ash and silk into shroud. The palace woke to the soft, horrified rustle that follows a first corpse. And then the harder clatter of lockdown, iron bars sliding, crossbeams dropping, horns sounding 3 low notes that meant seal the gates, count your dead. Orders moved like knives. Guards split the halls into sectors and drew chalk lines on marble. Anyone found past a line without leave was to be bound and questioned. Servants clutched each other in corners, all elbows and breath and superstition. Whispered prayers breeded with rumors. The rumor that mattered most floated fastest. The mark above the body had been Nightshade. The mark followed. Mira like a shadow that wanted to wear her skin. Kael met her in the eastern gallery, where the tall windows turned the dawn into a sickly pallor. The floor between them held the smear of a stretcher and the barest spike of iron smell. He wore no cloak now, only a leather jerkin dark with rain and something more primal fraying at the edges, the wolf under the man pacing, tasting the air. On his wrist, beneath glove and bracer, a faint heat pulsed that he could pretend not to feel only while his eyes were closed. Open-eyed, the pull toward her dragged like a tide. He kept the crowd at distance with the kind of stillness that warns storms are thinking. He had not announced what the oracle told him, but power informs before words do. Each captain in the hall could read what pressed below the Alpha's composure. Bond, threat, choice. The oracle arrived last, a drift of silver among iron. Her novice carried a bell that did not ring. It only hummed, and the hum made the torches bend. The chalk sigils they scrawled on the walls were old enough to remember when the mountain was a volcano and wolves were stories whispered by the lava. Mira watched them glow when Kael passed and gutter when she did, then steady again if they stood together. What woke below liked the space between them best. They began with the body room. It was clean now, palace clean, which meant death had been convinced to step politely into a linen shroud before it was taken away. They had left the message. A crude Nightshade crest painted in dark, sticky strokes above the lintel. It was wrong by a hair, one bar too long, a curve too sharp like a signature forged by someone who had only seen the original once and blamed their memory for the wobble. The correction of it cut through Mira's mind like a bright needle, not Nightshade. Something pretending to be it, hungry for the history the symbol carried. She said as much. The guards shifted their weight. Corin's jaw tightened. The oracle pressed her palm to the wall. The paint did not feel like paint. It felt like old blood warmed by a breath not present in the room. Imitative craft, she said, mouth thinning. It wants you hunted. It wants the Alpha cornered. It wants a story it can eat. Kael pushed past the shiver that ran his spine at the word eat. We're not feeding it fear. But fear was an efficient butcher. Before the bell struck noon, 2 more bodies had been found in separate wings, each beneath a wrong Nightshade crest. Panic put its hands on the throat of the palace and squeezed until conversation came out in whistles. Nobles demanded explanations with the precise decorum of people whose politeness has teeth. A message reached the gates in a lacquered carriage. The Moonlight Empire's envoy had arrived early, allegedly to offer condolences for the first death, actually to count if Kael bled. Seraphine Valeries walked into the morning like a knife dressed as a hymn. She made a show of lowering her hood for the guards so they could admire the innocence she wore over the place where her pulse beat. When she caught sight of Mira, the innocence faltered for a flash, enough for the appetite underneath to show its teeth. She quickly smoothed it with exquisite pity. Oh dear, her eyes said to the room. The Omega looks so tired. The room bristled on cue. They set their theater aside when the oracle's bell finally chimed. Once and every torch in the hall spat blue. There, Lysandra said softly, and the word turned everyone's head toward the long corridor that led to the oldest chapel. Mira felt it before. She saw it, the pressure change. The ripple through air as though the palace had taken a single huge, quiet breath. Kael felt it as weight over his shoulders, the press of a pelt thrown by an unseen hand. They moved together, not by plan but by instinct, and the guards fell in behind, coronet point. 4 archers at the sight lines. The chapel's doors stood open. They were carved with the story of the moon's first blessing. Wolves kneeling in a ring while a woman with gold hair poured light from a bowl. In the present moment, that light had gone wrong. The stained glass along the nave flickered as if a storm passed behind the color, though the day outside was clear. The candles had drowned in their own wax and burned again anyway. On the floor before the altar, a third crest Waitley shone. This one was almost correct. Whoever was copying had learned it moved, not by much. Just enough that the left bar lengthened the way ink creeps into paper grain. Just enough that the bottom curve reached toward the nearest. Boot like a drop of water discovering how to be a hand. Corin seized Mira's sleeve to yank her back. She didn't collide with him because Kael's arm had already shot forward and his hand found her waist, anchoring without thought. A trivial contact, and yet the whole room altered. The wrong crest stuttered, then recoiled. Like oil when water is poured into it, the oracle's voice was a thread of iron. It was never pain. The chapel floor thrummed once, a bass note only bones could hear. The cracks between stones blackened. Out of the black came fingers. Too many, too long, knuckled like knots and roots. They fanned across the marble in a spidering rush, searching for warm ankles. Arrows sang. Steel slammed. The first of the things breached fully, the suggestion of a man's shape with the wrong math. Joints bending where joints shouldn't, shadows where muscles should have been. The archer's shafts passed through as if through smoke and came out the other side sizzling as though they'd been plunged in fat. When Kael's blade cut, the thing's side split and dissolved into a rise of cold that made the skin pucker along Mira's arms. Her claws tore in the opposite direction through the light of it. When she struck, it shrieked in a pitch that was not sound but the memory of sound. The way a childhood fear comes back wearing the face of your room at 3 in the morning. The things did not want blood. They wanted heat. Every breath they touched came out frosted. One leapt for the closest body and passed through, and the guard collapsed with eyes like a fish at market. Winter had entered his lungs and frozen the prayer he hadn't yet reached for. Mira dropped beside him, fingers on his throat. Cold burned her skin. Naira reared inside, hackles up, a balanced, deadly fury she had learned in cages where only the right kind of rage frees you. The heart under the mountain pulsed in answer, sending a faint ring of white across the floor that pushed the winter back an inch. It was enough. Kael felt the shift as pressure easing, the wolf in him surging forward to meet it. He moved with it, not over it, blade like a pendulum. Each cut a clock tick measuring the space in which his people could still live. He understood in motion what he refused in stillness. Whatever woke them woke when he and Mira were apart. Whatever held them back happened when their bodies mapped the same ground. The fight narrowed. The room learned their names. The things that had crawled through the seams of the world. Learned hunger could be injured. Then the chapel went silent with the suddenness of a window thrown open. The remaining things retreated in a single rippling roll, sliding into the seams of the stones as if gravity had reversed. The last set of fingers scratched up the air and vanished. The wrong crust on the floor heaved like a dying lung and then flattened to nothing. The only sound left was breathing. And the wet, human weight of the dead. Seraphine stepped delicately over a smear. Face composed in a sorrow that smelled lightly of citrus and calculation. The envoy at her back rearranged their expressions into appropriate masks. How terrible, she breathed, and let her gaze skin the place where Kael's hand still held Mira's waist. A fraction too long because he had forgotten his hand was there. It was all the envoy needed. A flicker of a glance filed for later. The oracle moved to the altar and laid her palm on the stone. Her brow tightened, then smoothed. "It is listening," she said, not to anyone in particular. "It is learning. And it has found a way to drink through the cracks." She turned, sightless gaze finding Mira. "The heart below answers you. It will answer only you. It must be sealed or walled or fed with a sacrifice you will not like." Mira's mouth went dry. The vision of the woman with her face kneeling before the fire clanged in her skull. Chains, wrists, a single command. Live. Kael heard only the last words spoken aloud. Sacrifice. The oracle tilted her head, as if to listen to a choir only she could hear. Blood binds what iron cannot. Nightshade blood opened the first gate. Nightshade blood may close the last. Seraphine's head twitched, a small pleasurable startle hidden inside the timing of a breath. How fortunate, her posture said without moving her lips. that an expendable Nightshade stands ready. Kael felt the thought form in the room and wanted to break it with his teeth. The bomb murmur under his skin flared raw. His wolf pressed hard enough that his grip on the human shape slipped for a heartbeat. The bracer at his wrist smoked. The half-formed mark ghostlit there and vanished, a warning like a spark dropped in dry grass. He stepped away from Mira by force of will he would deny later. He said nothing, because anything he would have said would have been a vow spoken in front of enemies, but cut the day into plans. Patrols doubled. The eastern wing sealed. Priests summoned. Archives gutted to find the original story of how the mountain had been convinced to cradle a heart not its own. When the nobles demanded public serenity, Kael gave it to them, a speech from the dais. Words that lay calm over water while something vast moved beneath in between orders. He and Mira were alone for precisely the length of a candle's whisper in the chapel's side vestry. The air still carried the sharp, ozone-bright scent the not paint had left. He faced the opposite wall to stay sane. She stood with hands braced on the basin where acolytes washed their fingers before touching holy things. They did not speak, because to speak would be to acknowledge an edge that once named could not be unnamed. The silence between them burned a clean hole through the noise of duty. Somewhere inside it, an understanding arranged itself without words. If she went below, he went with her. If he faltered, she would hold the line. If the heart demanded one life, they would find a third answer or make one out of bone and law. The candle died. The spell broke. The world resumed the habit of devouring hours. By midnight, the palace was a maze of watchfires and whispered countersigns. The dead had names and their names had families. And grief moved from the privacy of rooms to the economy of kitchens. 2 extra loaves sent. A bottle of bitter brewed, a door left open for company you did not have to entertain. The kind of tenderness wars forge, unsentimental. Accurate. Mira walked the old servant's passages with a map in her head that no captain owned. She marked the faint whites where the stone had been touched by colder fingers and the places where warmth pooled for no reason. The warmths aligned into a circle around the oldest stair. When she placed her palm to the newel post, her nightshade scar warmed like someone exhaled across hot metal. Below, the heart beat in answer, slow, endless. The metronome of something that had never learned to die. She waited until she could hear Kael's tread in the cross corridor before she lifted the latch. He came alone, without guards, wearing the kind of expression that made lesser men look away and the brave step nearer. The bond hummed like a struck string. It did not feel like romance. It felt like gravity improving its grip. They went down. The stair was older than language. The stone changed as they descended, shifting from polished marble that remembered ballrooms to the rough, volcanic lung of the mountain. Cold breath from the dark. Their torches guttered and steadied and guttered again. Halfway, the ear tightened. Kael's hand shot out on reflex. Not to save her, she did not stumble, but to answer the way the stair itself seemed to tilt toward a throat unseen. His fingers closed around her wrist. The mark under his bracer flared once, visible through leather and skin, ghost bright. The mountain responded. A door of rock that had been a wall peeled itself open with a grinding sigh. Wind poured through, carrying the smell of old rain in caves and the thin sweetness of burnt herbs. On the threshold, symbols long erased by empire blinked awake. The true Nightshade crest among them, correct to the hairbreadth, Mira's breath fogged. Naira squared her stance inside. Kael shifted his weight forward, the wolf in him leaning to sniff a world that wanted him for more than meat. The light from their torches did not go far, but it went far enough to pick out an altar of black stone and the suggestion of something sleeping on it, the shape of a heart, the size of a man's torso. Pale, translucent, beating once every 30 breaths, they stepped in together. Far above. A bell began to ring that meant the gate had been breached. The sound came down the stair as if poured through a throat, distant, spiraled wrong. The last note broke in the middle and bled into a scream. Not the hearts. Human, the mountain's dark breathed in. Then all the torches in the passage went out. The torches died as though something had pinched their throats. Darkness poured in, dense, physical, alive. Mira's breath hit the air and turned to frost. Kael's hand found hers without thought. His palm was fire, hers ice, and the space between their fingers hissed where they touched. Then the mountain moved. A low, rolling tremor, deeper than thunder, older than language. rose through the floor and into their bones. The altar ahead, the one holding the pale heart, began to glow with a sickly, luminous pulse. It was no longer white. It was turning black from the center outward, veins of darkness crawling through it like ink and water. Mira stepped forward. The pull was magnetic, irresistible. Every beat of that corrupted heart echoed inside her chest. Naira, the wolf within, whimpered in confusion, torn between reverence and terror. It's calling us, the wolf whispered. No, Mira answered in her mind. It's remembering us. Kael unsheathed his blade. The steel caught a faint gleam even in the dark. He could smell it now, iron, ozone, and something like rot beneath stone. What is it? He said, but his voice sounded far away, muffled by the pulse. Mira approached the altar. Symbols carved into its base ignited one by one, each flare accompanied by a whisper of lost names. Her hair lifted slightly as if a storm were forming around her. The mark on her shoulder burned bright enough to cast its own light. Then she saw them, faces inside the flame. Not human. Not wolf. Twisted things, half seen, half remembered. The ancestors of the Nightshade line. One of them spoke without a mouth, blood for blood. Heart for heart. The gate must be closed, or the world will drown in hunger. The voice reverberated until the air itself cracked. Kael pulled her back. Enough! But the shadows behind them had already begun to move. They oozed from the stone walls, crawling across the floor like spilled ink, searching for shape. Dozens, then hundreds. Each one whispering the same two syllables. Kael, Kael. He turned, blade raised, but they did not attack. They formed a circle around him, bowing like worshippers. Mira's stomach turned cold. They're not here for me. The shadows rose together, joining into one vast figure that filled the chamber. It had Kael's face, but older, ruined, eyeless. Chains wrapped its body like ribs. When it spoke, the sound was his own voice, distorted, broken. I am what your father became. I am what you will be. Kael staggered. The phantom of his father's death flooded back the night the old Alpha vanished into the lower halls, leaving only torn armor and a smear of black ash. This is his grave, Mira whispered. And his curse. The Shadow King smiled with teeth of smoke. You think you can close the gate? You are the gate. You are the hinge of the moon's heart. Kill her, Kael, and you will be free. Keep her, and you will inherit my hunger. Kael gritted his teeth, every muscle in his body fighting the pull of the command. The bond burned between them like a live wire. Mira felt it too, the temptation to surrender, to let fate decide. But she stepped forward instead. No, she said softly. We finish what you began. She drew her claws across her palm. Blood fell on the altar. The heart flared. The chamber screamed. The shadow roared, its voice splitting into 1,000 echoes. Kael lunged forward, sword cutting through black mist. And the world fractured. The floor gave way beneath them. They fell. For a heartbeat there was no up. No down, only the sensation of being swallowed whole by the mountain itself. Then they hit stone again in a cavern vast as a city. The heart's light burned through the ceiling above like a dying sun. Mira rose, her hands still bleeding. Her blood was no longer red, it shimmered with silver light, the color of moonfire. The wound refused to close. Kael knelt, gasping, his blade cracked in half beside him. Around them, carved pillars shaped like wolves twisted into serpents. Each pair of eyes began to open, glowing from within. A circle of statues that weren't statues at all, guardians. Bound to the heart, one moved. Then another stone flaked away, revealing sinew and fur beneath. They stepped down from their pedestals, 6 of them, massive, ancient, their bodies etched with runes that smoked faintly. Kael reached for the broken sword and met the gaze of the largest guardian. The creature's eyes were pure silver. We were set to guard the heart. You brought its key. Mira felt the meaning behind the words more than she heard them. We came to close it, she said. The guardian tilted its head. To close it is to kill the blood that binds it. One must die for the mountain to sleep again. Kael rose slowly. Then it will be me. The words hit her like a blade. No, you're the Alpha. The realm needs you. The realm will die if this opens. He looked at her, and for the first time his voice trembled. If I go into the dark, you can seal it behind me. The heart's pulse grew faster. The air shimmered with heat and cold both. Mira's tears turned to frost as they fell. But before either could move, the shadows struck again, this time not from the walls, but from inside the guardians themselves. The runes across their chests flared black. They convulsed, their loyalty devoured by the curse that had slept too long. Kael pushed Mira aside as one lunged. Claws raked across his arm, drawing blood that hissed on contact with the floor. The scent of it sent the rest of the beasts into frenzy. Run! He shouted. She didn't. She reached for the heart instead. Her blood answered the call. The silver veins in her arm glowed brighter until her whole body was haloed in cold fire. She pressed both palms to the heart and screamed, not from pain, but from the force tearing through her. The heart began to unravel. It didn't explode. It folded inward, collapsing into itself, shrinking as light poured out. Every shadow screamed. The guardians howled, torn between their oaths and the curse. Kael's wolf took control at last, ripping through his skin in a storm of fur and bone, a creature of silver fire and rage. He tore the nearest beast apart, his fangs glowing white-hot. Mira! He roared, but she couldn't hear him. The heart was drawing her in. Her body was dissolving into light. She saw memories that weren't hers, wars fought before names, the first moonrise, the first betrayal. She saw her mother kneeling before the same heart centuries ago, sealing it with her life. Mira. The voice came faintly, ancient and tender. Every Nightshade is born twice. Once to live, once to guard. It's your turn, child. Kael reached her, arms around her waist, trying to pull her back from the vortex of light. His claws dug into the stone for purchase, but the pull was relentless. No. He shouted, "You don't leave me." She turned her face to him, eyes glowing with silver fire. "If I don't, you die. If I do, maybe the world lives." He tightened his grip until blood ran between his fingers. "Then we died together." The bond flared one last time, brighter than the sun. The mountain roared. Light swallowed them both. When the tremor finally stopped, Silvercrest Palace lay silent. The heart beneath the mountain was gone. In its place, a hollow crater pulsed once, faintly, and went still. Days later, the oracle found the two of them lying amid the ruin. Kael breathed, barely. Mira did not. Her body shimmered faintly, the silver light ebbing slowly like the tide retreating from shore. The oracle knelt beside her and touched her forehead. "The gate is closed," she whispered. "But the cost is never finished." Kael woke 3 nights later, alone. When he reached for the bond, there was only silence, but the mark on his wrist still glowed. Somewhere in the thin world between dreams. A voice whispered back, "I'm still watching the door." My Alpha dot, and far below, in the mountain's sleeping heart. A single beat answered her. The mountain slept for 40 days. Then on the 41st, it breathed again. The sound was subtle, just a tremor deep under the stone foundations of Silvercrest Palace. But every wolf in the realm lifted its head at once. Birds fled the tree line. Rivers changed course. Something beneath the earth had begun to stir that was not supposed to stir again. Kael Rowan stood alone on the balcony of the ruined keep, his cloak unmoving despite the wind. He had not slept since the night the heart was sealed. The air around him smelled of cold iron and old rain. His eyes, once black shot with silver, were now entirely silver like the reflection of a moon with no sky to live in. The world thought him victorious. The oracle had declared the curse broken, the gate sealed, the Alpha triumphant. But Kael knew better. He still felt her. Mira's presence haunted every heartbeat. Sometimes he woke choking on her scent. Sometimes he heard her voice in the howl of the wind. And at night, when the moon turned red with dust, he could feel her standing behind him so close he could almost touch her. But if he turned, there was only Miss Daw. He had promised her they would die together. Instead, she had kept that promise for both of them. The council urged him to move on. Marry, strengthen the bloodline. Restore the realm. But Kael had stopped believing in bloodlines. He had seen what they cost. He turned from the balcony and walked down into the war room. Maps covered the tables, each marked with spreading stains of red wax where disturbances had been reported. Towns where crops froze overnight. Rivers where fish surfaced dead. Forests where shadows moved without wind. Every mark pointed toward the same. Center the mountain, corn entered quietly behind him. His beta had aged a decade in a month. "They're saying the frost is back," he said. "The farmers call it the silver rot. It starts in the soil. Anything that grows turns to glass." Kael didn't look up. And the oracle? She won't leave the inner sanctum. Says she's listening for the heartbeat. Kael's hands tightened on the table edge. The wood cracked beneath his fingers. There shouldn't be a heartbeat. Corin hesitated. There shouldn't be a living Luna either. Kael's head snapped up. What did you say? Corin swallowed. A patrol found something last night in the ruins of the southern chapel. Looked like a woman made of moonlight. Faded when they tried to touch her. The silence that followed was the kind that bent metal. Where? Kael said at last, voice low, dangerous. Corin pointed to the map. The circle around the southern cliffs looked like a wound. There, but Kael, he was already gone. The cliffs above the river were haunted by wind. It screamed through the caverns like a trapped soul. Kael climbed alone, ignoring the protests of his guards, the bruising cold, the scent of death lingering on the stone. His boots left dark prints in the frost. The Gate of Mirrors. The chamber was vast and circular, its walls made entirely of black crystal. Each surface reflected not the present, but what had been the ghosts of every soul who had touched the heart before. And in the center of it all, beneath a rain of silver dust, stood Mira. She turned slowly, her hair drifting like smoke. Her skin glowed faintly, half light, half shadow. Her eyes, once the color of morning, were now split like the moons above, one silver, one black. Kael. She breathed. Her voice was both hers and not hers, an echo layered with another deeper, older tone. You shouldn't have come. He took a step forward. You knew I would. She smiled sadly. Yes, that's what I was afraid of. The bond flared between them, a current of power that shook the walls. Every mirror in the chamber rippled with light. Within them, Kael saw hundreds of reflections of himself, of Mira, of versions of their story that ended differently. Some lived. Most died. What is this place? He asked. The heart's core, she said. The Gate of Mirrors shows every path the curse could take. Every choice we've already made. Every one we still might. Kael's gaze locked on one reflection, the two of them standing together in the ruins, the heart sealed, the world whole. But in that reflection, Mira was gone. Another showed her alive, but the earth burning beneath her feet. There's no ending where we both live, she whispered. The curse was born from love that defied the moon's law. Every generation paid for it. Now it's our turn. He shook his head. No, we ended differently, together. Her expression softened, but her eyes, those twin moons, filled with sorrow. The only way to end it is to break the bond. And breaking it means breaking us. Kael's heart twisted. Then I'll die with you. She stepped closer. You already did the moment you came here. The ground shook. Cracks splintered across the chamber floor, spilling molten light. The heart beneath the world was waking fully now, its rhythm slow, monstrous. Final dot. Mira raised her hands, and the air itself obeyed her. The mirrors around them began to turn inward, forming a ring of light and shadow. At their center, a void opened black as death, bright as birth. This is the gate, she said softly. If it opens, everything ends. If I enter it, it seals again forever. But once I go through, there's no coming back. Not for me. Not for you. Kael's jaw clenched. Then we find another way. There isn't another way. Her voice broke. The curse isn't in the heart, Kael, it's in us. He stared at her, realization dawning like the edge of a blade. The bond wasn't just love. It was the chain that kept the gate closed. As long as they were both alive, it would keep tearing open. Drawn to reunite its halves light and shadow, Mira stepped closer, close enough that her breath touched his. If we stay, the world dies. If we end, it lives. Kael's fingers brushed her cheek. You were my curse the day I met you. And you were mine, she whispered. But you were also my freedom. He kissed her then. It was not soft or desperate. It was the stillness before the storm. The acceptance of fate. The final heartbeat of something eternal. When they pulled apart, the gate was roaring, wind howling in every direction. The mirrors cracked one by one, each shattering, releasing bursts of light that cut through the dark. Mira looked up. It's time. Kael caught her hand. Not alone. She smiled faintly. Always together. They turned toward the gate. The light wrapped around them, lifting them from the floor. The world outside the chamber shook, mountains splitting, skies burning, oceans roaring as if the planet itself were crying out as they reached the edge of the gate. Mira looked back once more. When they tell our story, she said, let them say the curse ended with love. Kael squeezed her hand. Let them say we rewrote the moon. And together they stepped into the light. Silence. Then, slowly, the mountain exhaled. The cracks sealed. The rivers stilled. The two moons, silver and black, merged once more into one, whole and bright. The curse was gone. Above the ruins of Silvercrest, the dawn broke clean for the first time in 1,000 years. The wolves howled not in mourning but in peace. The oracle's tower, long collapsed, bloomed with wild white flowers. In their petals shimmered faint flecks of silver dust, remnants of something divine. And at night, when the moon rose high, some swore they saw two figures standing within it, hand in hand, watching over the world they had saved, the Alpha and the Nightshade, the curse and the cure, the love that ended the dark. The story had found its silence. The mountain slept, and in the stillness of eternity, two hearts beat as one. The old chapel stood half buried in ice. The door had collapsed inward, revealing the altar where Mira had once stood beside him. Where the first crest had bled through the marble, the air shimmered faintly. And Kael froze. There, just beyond the broken altar, a shape flickered. A woman's outline, barely visible, woven from light and mist. Her hair floated as if underwater. Her eyes were closed. Mira. The word left him like a prayer or a curse. The apparition turned. For a heartbeat, she looked at him. Her lips moved, but the voice that came was not sound, it was felt. Kael. The heart breathes again. Then she was gone. The ice cracked under his knees as he fell forward. Grasping at air. When he looked down, he saw that his hand was bleeding. Not from the ice, but from the mark on his wrist. It had reopened, pulsing silver. That night, Kael summoned the oracle. She came limping, her silver robes torn and darkened with soot. Her eyes, once blind and bright, were now dim, as if too much truth had burned through them. You saw her, Lysandra said softly. It wasn't a question, Kael nodded. She spoke of the heart. You said it was sealed. I said it was sleeping, the oracle corrected. And now it dreams. The gate does not open all at once. It stirs first, through memory, through bond. Mira Thornfield's soul was bound to the heart when she sealed it. If the heart wakes, so will she. Kael's pulse thundered. Then I'll bring her back. Lysandra shook her head. If you pull her from that place, you pull the heart with her. She's its anchor now. The bond between you has become the chain that keeps the world intact. Break it and the curse will breathe. He turned away. Then I'll find another way. There is no other way, she said, voice rising. If you love her, you must let her die completely. Kael's hand slammed into the table, splitting it in half. You don't understand. I did let her die. I've been dying with her every day since. The oracle didn't answer. She only bowed her head as though grieving what she could already see coming. When she left, Kael stood alone in the candlelight, the broken table at his feet, and the mark on his wrist glowing like a wound that would never close. He whispered into the empty room. Mira, if you can hear me, hold on. Outside, the moon turned blood-red. Mira heard him. In the space between life and death, where sound was color and time was water, she heard his voice ripple through the void. She stood on an endless plain of glass, beneath a sky full of drifting shards of light. The heart floated above her, no longer solid, but fractured, bleeding both light and shadow. Every beat sent a ripple through the ground. When Kael's voice reached her, the heart pulsed faster. Mira, if you can hear me, hold on. She raised her hands. Her fingers were translucent, made of the same light as the air. Kael! The surface beneath her feet cracked. A chasm opened, and from it rose the shadows, the same things that had crawled from the walls of the chapel. They whispered her name this time. Not Kael's. Hers. Mira. 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 They circled her like wolves, shapes without faces. You closed the gate, they hissed. Now open it again. Let us feed. She turned her face upward toward the heart. It was splitting slowly like ice under pressure. Silver light spilled through, but so did darkness, twisting together like twin rivers. If it broke, the world above would burn. She fell to her knees and pressed her palms against the glass ground. Her light bled into it, tracing runes of power older than her bloodline. The Nightshade magic answered, forming a new seal, but her strength faltered. Every time she tried to close the heart, Kael's voice echoed through her, pulling her toward him. The bond was a double-edged sword. If she gave into it, she would live again and the world would die. If she resisted, she would fade forever. She chose the only thing she could. She began to write a message. Her light etched itself into the fabric of the void. A circle of words that carried through the bond. Straight to Kael's dreams, don't come for me. Seal it from your side. Let me go. Then she screamed, not from pain, but from the force of the heart tearing open. Kael awoke gasping, drenched in sweat. The dream burned behind his eyes. He could still smell her jasmine and ash. Corn burst into the room. The oracle's dead, he said. Her tower collapsed at dawn. And the moon? Kael looked out the window. The sky was wrong. The moon had split in two. Each half glowed a different color, one silver, one black. Between them, lightning arced in silence. The heart was opening again. Kael picked up his father's sword, the blade reforged in secret. Its edge lined with silver dust and nightshade runes Mira had once traced with her fingers. He strapped it to his back. Where are you going? Corn asked. To end this, Kael said. One way or another. He looked up at the broken sky. The wind carried her voice again, faint but certain. Mira Thornfield, my moon. If the gate takes you, I'll follow, and in the void below the mountain. Mira whispered back, then we'll seal it together. The air between worlds shimmered. The bond flared like a star being born. Light and darkness collided. The silver moon began to rise again, and the story was far from over. The sky cracked. The twin moons, one silver, one black, hung above the world like the eyes of a god about to weep. Every wolf across the kingdoms howled, not in unity, but in confusion. The bond that tied the earth to the moon had split, and the mountains trembled beneath its weight. Kael Rowan stood at the edge of the broken cliff, the wind slashing across his cloak, the taste of iron on his tongue. Below him, the mountain rumbled with the voice of something awakening. Above him, the heavens burned. He felt the bond pulling him south toward the ruins of the heart chamber. Toward her, Mira. He whispered, the word torn from his throat. The mark on his wrist pulsed like a dying star, silver bleeding into black. He knew then that she was alive, and that the world would not survive her return. The path down the mountain was gone. What remained was chaos, rivers of ash, veins of silver light cutting through the dark rock like arteries. Kael walked through them without hesitation, his sword drawn, its runes whispering softly in his grip. He passed the corpses of wolves that were not wolves anymore, creatures twisted by the awakening of the heart. Their eyes glowed faintly with the same light that once crowned Mira's hair. He tried not to look too long. Every face seemed almost human. The air grew heavier the deeper he descended. The tunnels were breathing again, the same pulse he remembered from that night, the pulse of the mountain's dying heart. Then the voice came. Kael. It was not sound, it was memory. She was calling him through the bond. But there was something new in her tone. Something hollow. Something ancient. He followed it. Down through the crumbling stairways, past doors that bled light, through corridors where time had stopped moving. Until he reached the place he had seen only in dreams.